Rejoice in the Lord always. Then again I say rejoice. Hello friends, and welcome to Summer in the Scriptures. Our passage today is found in Paul's letter to the Philippians. When he wrote this passage, or when he wrote this letter, he was in prison, and yet in every chapter he is expressing joy. In every chapter he is calling the Philippians to rejoice. According to Paul, joy comes when we know Christ, when we experience His salvation. And he even goes on to say that our goal in life is to know Christ and to experience the joy and the power of His resurrection. At the same time, in the very middle of this letter, Paul says something else. He tells the Philippians and us to do everything without grumbling and complaining. That's pretty hard to do. To not complain about the things around us that we see and feel as being wrong. To not complain. We complain a lot in our culture. We complain about the weather. It's either too hot or it's too cold. It's either not raining enough or it's raining too much. We complain. We tend to look at the world around us from what we lack, what is not right. We look at ourselves critically. We look at other people critically, and we just complain and grumble. And according to Paul, that sucks the joy right out of living. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge when things are not as they ought to be. Things were not as they ought to be when Christ was here. Things were not as they ought to be when Paul was writing this letter. It's not sticking our head in the sand and saying everything is just fine when it's not. And yet, complaining and grumbling about life is not the way we get to the place that Christ wants us to be. To attain the joy of our salvation is rooted in gratitude and thanksgiving. Even when things are not as they ought to be, Christ is with us. Christ is here to bring us life. And so we always have something to rejoice about. And if we take up this mantle of rejoicing in the Lord always, we just may find that we do experience the joy of our salvation, that we do experience the power of Christ's resurrection in our life. And that is what Christ desires for us. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say rejoice. I think that's a good message for us today. Until next time, I'm Susan Mitchell with Summer in the Scriptures.